folks, welcome to art journaling from the first part of May. And actually, I'm sorry, I think this is the second part of May. But we're going to play with some acrylic today. And if you watch the one of the videos from April, we did a lot of gessos and some fluid acrylics. Well, today we're going to do a lot of heavy acrylics with a little bit of gesso and a little bit of fluid. So I'm starting with a piece of Canson watercolor paper, and I've got some Simply Simmons brushes. I really adore them. They are a really good price for a pretty high quality brush. And I'm using some Studio Acrylics by Blick, and I'll get the specific colors in the blog post, which I'll link below this video on YouTube. And I'm working in a circular motion. You're going to see kind of a jump in the video here, but one of the things to keep in mind, because I'm working on untreated, yeah, see, I lost a little bit here, a little bit of footage. Sorry about that. But one of the things to keep in mind when you're working with acrylics on an untreated surface, that surface is really going to suck the moisture out of those acrylic paints. So I add a little bit of water. But you can't add too much water because when you add more than 30% of water to acrylic paint, it separates the acrylic molecules too much, and then the acrylic won't really bond that well with itself. But that is a little bit more fine arts based, and we're kind of playing around in a junk journal or an art journal here and kind of just having a good time. So the other thing I want to mention before I move on to what I'm doing now is I was working in a very circular motion with my brush, and I just kept spinning the brush and spinning the brush because I knew I was going to put this moon here, and I wanted this sort of radial effect. If I just worked up and down or left to right, then it would be very linear and brush stroke oriented. So just kind of keep that brush spinning in a circular motion, and you keep the paints wet, and you just create a gradient, and it's kind of like that song and dance. I like to use that term a lot. You put down the lighter color, and then you move to the medium color, and then you kind of work them together where they touch, and then you have the medium color and you put down the darker color and you kind of work them together where they meet. It is important to remember that it's easier to go from light to dark than dark to light. Once you've kind of played in, oh, I don't wash out my brush between paints. And that also helps create the gradient effect that was happening in the background. I'm really sorry that I lost that specific footage there, but you could see it with the first two colors at the beginning. Then after all of that was dry, I did get out some Liquitex gesso, and I created a circular area in the middle of my light blue color. And if you did watch the video from April about gessos, then you'll know that when you apply heat to gesso, it bubbles up, as long as you hold it in place longer than the recommended time, I should say, right? And this is something that I really love to do. I have a lot of fun playing with textures and creating dimension and things like that. So I have done that in the middle here. I made the gesso a little thick, and then I heated it with a heat gun. And then after that was actually cured and dried, then I went over it with some fluid acrylic in gray by DecoArt to highlight the divots that I created in the texture. And then that made this very cool, like, circular moon shape in my sort of what's going to turn into my night sky. Then I picked up a Simply Simmons comb brush, and I'm using this to create the trunks of some trees. And I've gone back in with gesso, and you know, we kind of pick up tips, and not kind of, but we definitely pick up tips and tricks and techniques from other artists, and sometimes we do our own things, and then they're just kind of validated by other artists. And I did just go to a weekend retreat with Donna Downey, and she said that in a lot of her pieces, instead of going to a white paint, a heavy body or fluid or whatever, more often than not, she actually goes back in with gesso. And I find myself doing that too. It is a little bit cheaper, but gesso just has its own sort of gritty primer base, because that's what it is. And I really enjoy that. So I used the gesso, the same gesso that I created the moon with, to create my trees with a brush. Then I heated those dry, and on the trees I didn't want texture, so I kept that heat gun moving. And now I've gotten out some golden fluid acrylic and a credit card. And I'm going to use the credit card in place of a palette knife or a spatula, which both would work really well here. And I'm dipping it in the fluid acrylic and scraping it along one side of the tree. And the point here is to kind of create shadows and turn these trees into the aspen trees, the really tall white ones that you see in the big forests. And it's just the scraping of the paint really keeps it organic and non-specific like trees tend to be. Now when you're creating your trunks, I try to tell my in-person art journal students, make it just a tad bit thicker at the bottom, and it should taper off towards the top, not disappearing completely, but also tree trunks don't go straight from the bottom to the top. Nature is really great in that nothing is perfect. So you can get a little wonky with your trees. They can cross if you want, or go a little to the left, or bend a little to the right, and then they're a bit more realistic while still being specific to you, and they're just very fun. We're just going to keep adding shadows here to our trees. And where it overlaps the moon there, you can see how great that really looks. It helps create a sense of depth. When I was doing it, I would get a little irritated where some of those scrapes got a little thick, like that one there specifically. And in one area, I think I did try to wipe it off, but part of this is just to go with it and to remember too that nothing in nature is perfect. Now to kind of put these trees really in perspective and make them just a tiny bit more realistic, I am taking that golden fluid acrylic and a super small brush and adding a few branches here and there. And then as soon as everything is dry, I've taken a tiny bit of gesso and a super small like liner brush, and I've added water to the gesso and then splattered it across the back page, and that made some stars. And these are new words from Wow Studio and Wanderlust. I just clipped it so that it would go to the top and the bottom, and I'm using golden gel medium to keep that in place, and I'll just plop something heavy down on top of that till it's dry, and I'm good to go. And then here I'm going to show a few pictures of my students in class, and you can kind of see the area that we've been working in, and a few of their examples too. Thanks so much, and don't forget to subscribe to see what we're working on next. Thank you.